1, go. Careful. What are you doing? Are you okay?
Hello and welcome to Power Drifting, the Rally Game podcast. In this episode, we will be ditching the polygons and taking a walk on the sprite side of life with the decidedly retro-inspired Super Pixel Racers. My name is Tom, and I'm joined once again in the virtual cockpit, 2 meters apart and wrapped in face masks, I should add, by everyone's favourite virtual co-driver, Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Tom. What a fantastic introduction.
Walking
on the sprite side of life is one of the greatest things I've ever heard.
I was going to say it's pretty big, this cockpit, with the social distancing measures we've introduced into the vehicle.
It is.
Yeah. So I hope you're doing okay over there on the other side of the car. Right, that's enough with the pleasantries. Let's get super pixelated. So yes, Super Pixel Racers. This one was developed by 21C Ducks, which is a very odd name for a developer, and even odder when you consider that the two main developers are listed in the credits as Space Duck and Baby Duck, hoping they aren't their real names, but if they are, then power to them. The game was published by H2 Interactive and was originally released on Steam, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in 2018, but we are talking about the Switch release, which came to Switch in April 2020. Mike, I believe you played it on the Switch also, but had you played this game prior to it coming out on Nintendo's handheld?
No, I've never even heard of it before. I think I sort of missed a lot of the arcade and indie games on the main consoles.
Yes. When I initially saw this game advertised on the eShop, I'm one of those people who kind of regularly browses the eShop to see what's coming up in the next week or so. And when I saw this, I was quite sort of intrigued because I like the style of it. I like the pixel artwork. I like it kind of gave me flashbacks of things like Macro Machines and Super Skid Marks on the old Amiga. And so it was one that I kind of bookmarked. But then going back and looking on the Steam store and also on PS4, I noted that it had been out for quite some time. And I think that's quite a common occurrence with Switch games, because they come to the Switch and you kind of think, oh, that looks interesting, I'll have a look at that. And then you go back to the other stores on another platform and then you kind of realise that this is a game that existed already on a different platform and was never really kind of advertised or given much of a fanfare. So,
I think, and paying a premium on Switch as well, of course, that's the issue as well, because it tends to be a bit more expensive on Switch.
Yes, the dreaded Switch tax raises its head quite often. Yeah, I know that myself. This game, Super Pixel Racers, as I say, we are looking at the Switch version primarily, released in April 2020, so it's been out for just over a month now. And this is mainly a rally cross game with a top-down perspective, and as I say, and as the name alludes to, more of a kind of an oxymoronic, retro-inspired, but with the modern feel. That sound about right? Yeah,
it does. Yeah.
So the name of the game comes from the distinct pixel art style. And before we jump into the gameplay modes and things, what are your thoughts on the overall style of the game, Mike? Is it something that resonates with you as a retro fan?
I think it's a bit of a two thing for me. I love the retro style of any game. This has got a really nice sort of 90s rose tinted glasses look in terms of the fact that it's not really what games looked like a huge amount in the 90s, but it's sort of a similar sort of thing. Reminds me a little bit of the sort of visuals they went for Retro City Rampage, sort of game.
Yeah.
But to me, I love. You mentioned Micro Machines earlier on. Micro Machines is my all-time favorite game. And it's very, very difficult because of the way the game works. It is almost very similar to a game called Power Drive, which I don't think we've covered yet. But a game I know both myself and you like.
Yes.
Which is on the Mega Drive and Jaguar. Yeah. And it's very much like that. Sort of it's not quite top down, is it? It's sort of not isometric either. It's a really weird sort of perspective.
It's almost like when you go into 3D mode on Google Maps, where it kind of the map kind of sort of looks up slightly from being straight on down, like top down. Yeah,
so it has that sort of like a 3D effect on 2D, which is quite nice. But there's a weird thing where none of the cars rotate as such. It's sort of a fixed view, which I find a little bit jarring to begin with. And I found that a little bit off-putting. But once you get into the game, I think you sort of become used to it. And yeah, the graphics are lovely in terms of that sort of retro appeal to it. They're a little bit unsurprisingly pixelated. I don't know. It's difficult for me to really make a judgment on it. It's on one hand, I love the sort of retro appeal to it, but at the same time, I do wish sometimes people who make these retro games don't go for this massively pixelated look to them. Not every game in the 1990s and late 80s was pixelated like that. You actually had some finesse to them.
Exactly,
so I think it's a little bit weird for me.
Yeah, I think modern developers kind of over-egg the retro style of these retro-inspired games to the point where games from that era just didn't look like that because they were going for realism, but they were pushing the boundaries of the technology to try and make things look real. And if they couldn't make them look real, they just didn't make them look like that. Anyway, we'll come on to that when we talk about the visuals. Before we get there, though, we're going to talk about the gameplay modes and some other aspects of this title. So, gameplay modes. There's a lot to do here. You've got a career mode, you've got a free mode, you've got an online multiplayer, you've got local multiplayer. Online multiplayer is something that I've actually not been able to sample simply because there's never anybody online. I know me and you, Mike, were going to arrange a time to see if we could get a game together, but that never materialised. It's weird that, isn't it? I mean, a lot of these games have online multiplayer aspects, but then you go into the lobby to try and find a game and there's never anybody online.
Yeah, so it's weird. I think there's a lot of, not only this game, but lots of games, there seems to be this massive push to get an online multiplayer mode into them, and half of them never get used. So a lot of time spent on a game, which is unused, which just seems a bit of a waste of resources to me.
I think the last game I played that was really that was on a handheld at least, that was really kind of good with an online multiplayer was Killzone on the PS Vita. When that first came out, and I had that game and the Vita, I would play the online deathmatch sort of religiously. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. But that for me is kind of one of the last times I played a game on a handheld, at least, that had a really kind of vibrant online scene. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the career mode here in Super Pixel Racers. The career mode is the main meat of the game. There are 9 categories of races, which increase in difficulty, and each class is broken down into a series of events, which fall into one of 6 game styles. So we've got Rallycross, which is a race against AI vehicles around an enclosed course. We've got a drift show, which is using the same courses, but you do drifts for points. Time trial, which, as you would expect, is a time trial. Takedown, which is an interesting mode, which sees you basically trying to smash other cars into the barriers using your turbo boost to destroy them and get points. And then we've got Land Rush, which is like Rallycross, but it's a point-to-point race on a sort of a point-to-point course with other vehicles, and then Rally, which is a traditional rally on procedurally generated courses. So yeah, there's lots of variety. We'll talk about our favourites, I suppose. I'm personally not keen on the time trials as they are quite difficult, and you need to basically get them. It reminds me almost of. Do you remember on Metropolis Street Racer on the Dreamcast where you have to keep going round and round and round the course?
Yes, yeah.
Each time shaving a little tiny bit off your time to try and make it within the time limit so you could win the vehicle. It's kind of the same here, but you need to get within the time limit to either get a silver, a bronze, silver, or a gold cup to move on to the next stage of the championship. And if you look through the different championships that I've got open on my version of this game, you will see that I've come to a point where I can't do the time trial, probably because I'm inept, to be honest, as I'm at most games, as I've said many times on this podcast. But it gets to the point where it's not fun anymore, where you have to be perfect at the time trial. There's no real margin for error. You need to do a perfect lap, get within that, that time frame to move on to the next course in the championship mode. And on all the championships I've got open, that's where I'm stuck. At time trial mode, and I just do not like it. I think it's really, really poor. Mike, what about yourself? Any favourites from that list?
Yeah, I think an interesting one. I don't know if it's a favourite or not, but an interesting one is the what's it called? The demolition mode. What's that kind of called now? It's the domination mode. Takedown. Sorry, takedown. Yeah, you edit that out.
No.
Takedown mode is pretty much a perfect cross between Destruction Derby and Burnout in a 2D space, which is a really interesting concept. It works quite well once you get used to it, and in some of the faster cars. But I think it's also the first event you get. It could be a time trial first, I'm not sure. It might be a rallycross even, but one of the very early events is this event. And to me, it was a real weird way of playing it, because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting this sort of 2D retro Burnout style game. But it grows on you. It's an interesting little concept. It's quite different for a rally game to have this sort of mode into it. But I think for me, the Rallycross is probably the best mode for me. I think it works really, really well. It's the most fun. And I think it's probably the thrust of the entire game, really. Most of the game is based around that sort of racing. And actually, when it plays to its strengths, the game really shines in the Rallycross mode.
Yeah, it's interesting you make a reference to Burnout and things like that, because I imagine if Burnout had ever come out on the Game Boy Advance, that this is the kind of thing we would have seen potentially.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so yeah, in the career mode, you've as I say, you've got lots of variety in the events. You need to complete the events in order to earn cash to upgrade your vehicle, which can make some events easier. Things you can upgrade include the acceleration, top speed, the durability of your car, and the boost. And the durability is required because hitting the barriers or other vehicles in modes that aren't the takedown mode will cause damage to your car, and ultimately, when you get down to zero vitality, if you want to call it that, your car is literally a ball of flames and will explode. Yes. We'll move on to gameplay then. So the controls in this game are a bit weird and do take some getting used to. The car auto accelerates, which initially put me off when reading about the game before I actually bought it. But it actually works quite well, as you only have to worry about the steering and the handbrake to slide around corners. And that's important because as you slide around corners, you fill your boost meter, and then when you have a full boost or even a half full boost, you can hit that button and you can speed past your adversaries or smash them into the barriers in the aforementioned takedown mode. Mike, there are two steering control methods in this game, pointing mode and classic mode. I should go into the differences between the two before asking you which is your favourite, so I'll do that. Pointing mode is whichever direction you point the analog stick in is where the car will face, and it's also known as the easy mode. And then there's classic mode, which is the analog stick needs to be pushed either left or right, and the car will kind of rotate, and that's called the hard mode. I preferred that mode because it kind of, when I first started playing the game and it was set default to pointing mode, I was just kind of driving all over the place going, my brain doesn't understand how this is working. I can't do it, So I changed to classic mode, and that was a case of you use left and right to kind of position the front of the car. What's your favourite mode?
Yeah, classic mode. I think it's any of us who've played Micro Machines is used to that sort of turn left and right when you need to turn left and right. I know that a lot of people had problems with that back in the day in 2D racers. They have a real issue. It's a major thing. If you look online, do a search online, people are always complaining about the fact that on top-down racers you have to drive in the way the car's pointing, as in a sort of a perspective of being in the car. But that feels natural to me. So yeah, same as you. I had the pointing mode on, and it felt completely off to me.
Yeah, there was like a weird disconnect between my hand and my brain. I'm just like, what is happening? I don't get this. How anyone can play that? I think what it is, Mike, is that because we come from a generation where the classic mode was the default, our brains are automatically wired to think that that's how this kind of game would control. But I suppose if you're younger and have never played this kind of game before, you would automatically maybe think that you would just use the analog stick to point the car in the direction. So I'm wondering if that's the case here.
Possible, yeah. I think it's there definitely was sort of a disconnect between like the late 90s and early 2000s, where a couple of games which were top down, I think Grand Theft Auto possibly as well had the same sort of issue where people just couldn't get used to the controls. So I know it's something which has been happening, and I can say from a personal perspective, my wife can't play Micro Machines because of the fact that she can't get her head around the fact of turning left and right when the car is the way it is. I personally can. The pointing mode to me feels, if it works for people, brilliant, but to me it just feels like it's completely wrong.
Yeah, and on the point of the auto acceleration as well, when I first, as I said earlier, when I first discovered that it was auto accelerate, it completely turned me off. But in practice, it actually really works well because it takes another thing out of the equation. You don't have to worry about accelerating. You can just literally use the brake to slow down and get around those corners. And in conjunction with those nice classic mode controls, it does work really well. So initially off-putting, but once you get your head around it, actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the visual side of things. So, as the name suggests, there's a distinct pixel art style, and it again looks like a modern retro game and takes inspiration from things like Power Drive, which you mentioned earlier, Mike, Skid Marks, and Micro Machines. I think there's a nice variation in the courses. There's quite a few different courses or environments here. You've got France, Italy, Belgium, Germany, Australia, the UK, US, Japan, Bahrain, Senegal, Malaysia, Brazil, Finland, Canada, and China. So there's a nice variation in the different courses, and you also get different weather styles. You've got rain, you've got day and night. It does actually have an effect on the way the game plays. One thing that I wasn't overly keen on, I don't know if you noticed this as well, Mike, but in some of the courses, you do get this kind of mist effect over the courses, and it can actually make it quite hard to see what you're meant to be doing. And I think it's not so much a weather effect; it's more a case of the cars have got exhaust fumes, or there's kind of smoke coming from the tyres, and it does actually get quite thick, and you can't really see what you're doing. Don't know if you've noticed that.
I have, yeah. I think I sort of put it down to being sort of the environmental effects. Sounds a really posh way of saying the pixels, but I think the way it works is the fact that they've tried to make the environments quite lively. And so I think they deliberately try to up that side of it. So when the other cars make a lot of dirt, which I think is missing on quite a few games. Even like 3D polygon games, there's a lot of games which don't really do that. It is difficult to drive occasionally, but I actually quite like that. I think it's quite a cool little effect.
On the topic of the courses being quite kind of busy and like sort of lived in, did you know the size of the spectators around the courses?
Yes.
About 18 foot tall when compared to the cars.
Yeah, it was a bit of an odd sort of. It reminded me a little bit of a Spectrum game in terms of the fact that they had the perspective off completely. But it was it's looking at the courses themselves actually, and obviously Finland's in there, which also pleases me obviously.
Yeah.
But actually the environments are actually really cool. I think they have a really good diverse range of courses, which is actually I was quite surprised as well. I thought there'd be like 5 or 6 different environments. I didn't realise there's going to be quite so many environments as there is. There's not a huge amount of tracks per environment, but a lot of difference and a lot of they really capture the essence of what that environment is. They're not putting Australia in as a tarmac road. They're putting Australia in as a road you'd expect to be in Australia, and it's quite cool.
As there's something you touched on there, Mike, the courses themselves are, as you said, for the most part, you do play on these kind of enclosed rallycross courses. Yeah. It's only later on in the game when you unlock it that you unlock the sort of procedurally generated rally courses. For the most part, I mean, I know we're talking about the visuals here, but we will talk a little bit about the pros and cons here as well. Is that even though they do look really nice and you kind of get this kind of open, it's nice to break away from the enclosed rallycross courses once you get out into the what you would call the wide open spaces of the actual rally themselves. It's a nice break, but it also comes with its own set of pitfalls, which doesn't really come across on the enclosed courses, and namely that is the fact that the camera is way too far zoomed in, and the game moves way too fast for a procedurally generated course. There's no co-driver, and so you do find yourself constantly kind of either going off the course, hitting the barriers, hitting the trees, which eventually inevitably leads to your car being destroyed because you've damaged it too much, and it kind of takes the fun out of it. I mean, if they'd basically just kept this as a circuit racer on rally-inspired courses, I think I would have been more than happy with that. The addition of the open procedurally generated rally courses is a nice touch, but I just don't think it works because the game is too fast, the camera's too zoomed in, the controls are too twitchy, and again, as I say, there's no co-driver. I
completely agree. Yes, the rally courses were real disappointing to me. I think they didn't structure the game the way they should have done. I think the rally courses should have been very early on in slower cars. I think that would have possibly given people the chance to sort of experience the rally courses, maybe get used to it a little bit easier. And with a slower car, you could probably build up your sort of abilities maybe a little bit quicker. When you get to unlock the rally courses, the cars, it's still not a particularly fast car. I can't remember which class it is you actually unlock the rally courses in. I think it's possibly the first or the second category, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's the C+ category. At the end of C+, you open up the rally course, yeah.
And it's really weird that it just doesn't feel like they really put much effort into it. It feels like they've got a rallycross game, and then they've gone, right, let's make a rally section as well.
Yeah.
Great in theory, but actually in practice, it just doesn't play well. It doesn't play well at all. There's a reason there hasn't been many top-down, long-course rally games. It's just not really conducive to that sort of thing. Things that something like Neo Drift Out, which is probably the most famous of the top-down style, or one of the most famous top-down 2D races, rally races. It hasn't got long courses. The courses are like a minute long each. I think it really doesn't really work massively. I think in Power Drive even, that wasn't really built around long courses, was it?
No, not at all, no. I think the only game that I've played recently that kind of does this well, which is Art of Rally, and that was only the demo version. That does it well, but the difference here is that I think it appreciates the fact that as the car speeds up and you need to be able to anticipate corners, well in advance, the camera kind of zooms out, it pans out, and you can see more of the environment. Whereas here, it just doesn't happen because it's the same game as when you are playing on those tight, small, little kind of rallycross courses, which it's great for, but not with the sort of the open-ended rally courses. It completely changes the style of the game. It just doesn't work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I tried to do Art of Rally, and unfortunately my PC won't run it. But there's a game on the Xbox One, I think on other consoles as well, called Amigal Racing, or Amigal Rally, sorry.
Okay.
Which is, I think it was free a couple of weeks ago. And it's a very similar sort of thing as Art of Rally, and sort of top-down or isometric style rally game. And that works really well in it. But it's built around that construct. It's built around that construct of being a top-down. It sort of has the car to the left of the screen or the top of the screen when the course is winding, so it doesn't sort of put you in the centre of the screen. Half the rally course isn't visible, and I think that's what the problem with this game is, the fact that it hasn't got that touch of being a rally style game. It's more about rally cross. And of course, that doesn't work when you put it into the procedurally generated rally stages, which is a real shame, because I was really looking forward to playing and get a 2D racer, which did do that really well on Switch. Yeah, just didn't quite work.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, really. It's unfortunate. Otherwise, the main meat of the game is conducted on these, as I say, enclosed, tight rallycross courses, which are really good fun. I must say as well, there's 10 vehicles in all in this game. They're all fictitious, but you can tell what they're meant to be. So you've got like a Mini, you've got an Impreza, a Stratus, a Mitsubishi Lancer, and they're all represented in like really cute little pixel art form, which I think is really cool. Especially the Impreza, it's like the blue with the little yellow dots on it, so you can tell it's meant to be the 1995 Colin McRae Impreza. That's really cool. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really find any difference in the handling other than the speed of the cars, of course, as you kind of continue up the ladder, getting more and more cars and upgrading them. But I found that you could kind of just take the basic Mini and just like kind of upgrade it as far as it could. And that was kind of fine for the most part. I don't know what you thought, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is one of those games where there isn't really much difference between the cars. There's not really much difference between the handling aspects of them. And I think that it's one of those games which sort of makes you have to invest in the upgrading. Yeah. And sort of makes you invest in it until it's fully upgraded, and then sort of gives you the next car, which I understand a lot of games do that, but I've never really felt the appeal of that kind of game. I just feel it's a little bit forced. It's a forced gameplay style where you sort of are constantly having to just upgrade the same car until you get a next car. I like the ability of, I think part of the great thing about rallying is that you sort of have these sort of makeshift road cars which can sort of just put around town in, and also you can drive in rally games. And someone who doesn't drive, that's sort of the appeal, that sort of normality, and that sort of it's rallying is a really weird sport. It's very much like people who play bus driving games or truck racing games. In that it's really quite a boring idea, driving a car through mud or dust. And I think that's part of the appeal is kind of road cars and that sort of normality. And I think this game doesn't really get that. It's an arcade racing game. Great, it's sort of as a 2D sort of Sega Rally style game. Yeah, brilliant. But yeah, I just found it. I found the progression of the game a bit forced.
It's an interesting point you make there, Mike. Actually, because I mean, on two points really. The first one is that I play a game called SnowRunner, and I played a game called MudRunner prior to that, which is basically hoofing great trucks through the mud as slow as you can think. engaging your differential lock and your all-wheel drive and creeping up a mountain at like 2 miles an hour. So yeah, it's a when you actually sit and think about what I'm doing, it's actually quite weird and boring.
Yeah.
And second, on the topic of the vehicles in rally games, I've noticed the trend certainly in modern or more modern rally games is that the car selections, when you look at the car selection screens, the cars that are kind of greyed out are the ones you have to like unlock sort of towards the end of the game, are things that you wouldn't normally associate with rally. So you've got things like Porsches or kind of Nissan Skylines. Two I can think off the top of my head in various rally games. I'm thinking, those aren't the kind of cars I want to use in a rally game. No. I want to use, a battered old Toyota Celica or a Mini. Do you know what I mean? It's not about a sleek sports car. It's about being able to just get through that muddy, grindy, horrible course through the trees. It's not about having a Porsche.
And that's what Sega Rally got right so well. The fact that the iconic car. Well, there's a couple of iconic cars, but the iconic car was there straight away. You played you played in the car that you wanted to play in, and I think same with things like Dirt Rally and Dirt Rally 2. Whereas yes, you have to progress, you have to get to the faster cars, but actually you can enjoy the game just by playing in the minis or the really slower cars. And one of the reasons I don't like arcade style games as much when it comes to rallying is because of the fact they just don't. It loses that sort of. It's a really difficult way of explaining it, but that basic sort of appeal where you just go with what you've got.
Do you think it's a case of in a lot of games where you kind of aspire to have a faster car? So if you try and do that with a rally game, it just doesn't work because that's not the whole point.
Yeah, it's the Gran Turismo effect. The Gran Turismo effect. It's this constant sort of racing games to appeal to people who want to get these kind of like supercars and these kind of like fast sort of lovely idealist cars for them. Actually, in rallying, that's not what it's about. It's not about getting that fastest car. It's about having that down and dirty, like you said, you mentioned Snow Runner and Mud Runner, that sort of thing. You sort of it's man against environment. It's not about having the fastest car. It almost feels like cheating to me. I always feel in a rally game, if I pick the fastest car, it's the only game I can think of, any genre I can think of, where I will set out and pick a car which is not the fastest car or the fastest or the best of something. Because actually, I don't want that. I don't want to have a supercar which sort of can just drive through really fast. I want to have that sort of ability of getting stuck in the mud. I want that ability where you sort of if you're teetering on the edge of a cliff, the car's not going to speed away at great speed because it's got great traction. It's going to be, you're going to be tumbling over to your death.
Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about the sound in Super Pixel Racers. I think the sound here is absolutely marvellous. Some great chip tune music, passable in-game effects, but a really bizarre skid sound, which rears its head every single time you press the handbrake. It's got a weird it sounds like a cat being strangled, like as I just demonstrated there with my superb vocal range. There's no co-driver, again, as we mentioned earlier, which is fine in the rallycross and in closed circuit events, but in the land rush and the rally mode, it kind of makes the game even more difficult than it already is because you can't anticipate what's coming next.
So I play the Switch usually quite quiet because I usually play it in the front room once the wife's watching some ridiculous TV program. So I don't tend to have music on, but I've actually listened to a little bit of this today actually, and yeah, it's got like a little catchy sort of tune, nice little tune. I think that's it's nothing spectacular, but it's nice.
I'm sure you'll appreciate the little kind of snippets of music that I've interspersed throughout this episode, so you can hear what we're talking about, and also the sound of the car's screaming cat handbrake sound effect. I do have a review here of Super Pixel Racers, and this is selected from the website Nintendo Life. So this is an excerpt from their review. Super Pixel Racers offers a simplified brand of top-down arcade racing with an intriguing handling model that's simultaneously casual and highly demanding. It might not be the richest, deepest, or most rewarding game of its type on Switch, but it's a worthwhile experience for those looking for some solo and local multiplayer arcade kicks. And the score given is 7 out of 10. Mike, would you like to give me your score out of 10 for Super Pixel Racers?
Yeah, this is probably the hardest one I've done in the entire series of podcasts so far, because it's the weirdest game. I hated it. I bought it on the first day it came out, and within a few hours I was really, really not liking it at all, for reasons I've already mentioned on the podcast. And then I got into it, and I really realised what the game was about, and I loved the sort of mechanics of it, and it played really, really well. And then the rallying came up, and that sort of killed it for me again. So it's a really weird game. At times it's been quite a high score. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to give it a 5. I don't think it does as well as it could do, and I think that there seems to be a lack of focus, or sort of, for want of a better word, on what the strengths of the game is. If they just done it on a rallycross, if they just done it on terms of it being an enclosed space against AI drivers, then the game would have been, I think, a lot stronger. Unfortunately, it just has some parts of it, and some parts you can't skip. You have to play the rally games to progress.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately for me, it's a 5.
Okay, slap bang in the middle then. I am going to give this game a 6 out of 10. I really like the visuals. I think the music's fantastic. Sound effects, not so much, but aesthetically, I think it's really appealing. I like the handling. What I don't like is pretty much what you just said, Mike. I think the track-based stuff is really cool, apart from the time attacks. And the rally mode was something that I was kind of aiming for to unlock, because I wanted to see what it was like. And then when I actually got it, it was just a bit of a slap in the face at how kind of badly executed it was. But as it stands, the arcade modes with the contained tracks are still pretty good fun, well worth playing. And if I can ever get a game online, I'm sure it's quite good fun online as well. So yeah, 6 out of 10 from me. So yeah, a 5 and a 6, just average really, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, if you've got a Nintendo Switch, give it a go.
I will say one thing very quickly before we finish the podcast. Dirt 5 has been announced. I know it's divided some people quite a lot, but I'm a massive fan of the old style Dirt games. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that when it comes out, this podcast will be covering it in quite a lot of detail, even if I have to force Tom to do
Mate,
it.
I'll be there. I'm a big fan of Dirt 4. I was just hoping for maybe Dirt Rally 3 as opposed to Dirt 5.
I think it's a weird thing, isn't it? I think a lot of people, we know from some feedback we've had on this podcast, is some people like their traditional rally games, and people like their sort of land rush style, or their sort of buggy racing. I love rallying, but I do love that sort of, I don't know, Dirt 2 for me just sort of did it, and I think it's that going back to that is a really good idea. So Dirt 5 will definitely be a game we will cover in the unfortunately quite distant future.
Yeah, so on the topic of our next game, we don't know yet, but we'll choose one soon out of the hat, I'm sure. It just remains for me to say thank you for listening. Thank you to Mike for joining me on this trip down the pixel side of life. I can't remember.
Pixel side of life, yeah.
The sprite side of life. Yeah.
Sprite side of life. We record.
So yeah, you can find us on the internet at powerdriftingpodcast.com. You can also find us on Twitter at powerdriftpod. And we're on iTunes and Spotify. Oh, and last but not least, thank you to everybody who's listened, because we just broke through 750 downloads of the podcast, so thank you very much. And we will see you on the next episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Finish!